BFM Morning Headlines. I'm Sharaad Kuttan and it's the 4th of August. Many stories occupy the papers today, ranging from MH17 to Ebola to the crisis in Selangor. And we'll start with the crisis in Selangor. This is the Malay Mail for you, asking, is there just too much politicking in the Pakatan? A very interesting story with a lot of analysis. All of the analysts are saying that the Pakatan is displaying misplaced priorities in focusing on the Menteri Besar who should be there. But there's also, I think, in some of the comments, quite a bit of misplaced criticism. And it stems from a misunderstanding of what our electoral system is and how it sets up to form a government. So the questions I would like to ask is the State Assembly election a presidential one? Now, this is important when you're trying to figure out whether Khalid personally was voted in as the choice of Menteri Besar. Now, related to that, people who think that's the case say, well, if you're going to remove Khalid, then you should have a snap election. Again, I think it starts from the wrong premise, and therefore, really, a snap election is not the solution to the problem. And finally, if Khalid is supported by PAS, not his party, is he still the legitimate Menteri Besar? And I think the question for that is quite simply yes, because all the Menteri Besar has to do is to have the confidence of a majority of the assemblymen. So get our facts right, and get analysis right, and perhaps our comments will be a little sharper. But there are problems not just in Pakatan Raya, there are problems also in the Barisan Nasional. And here you have it. This is a to and fro between the Minister of Tourism and Culture, Nazri Abdul Aziz, and the Secretary General of the MCA, one of the component parties of Barisan Nasional. And they were fighting over Nazri's support for Lim Guan Eng from the DAP, who is the Chief Minister of Penang, over his insistence that hawkers, well, the cooks at any rate, should be Malaysian, not foreigners. This toing and froing over that question resulted in Nazri saying that the MCA is often perceived as stupid and irrelevant as a party. And he goes on to say, MCA is a flip-flop party with no sense of direction since the last general election, and this is the reason they've lost the Chinese vote. Strong words, and they're actually from the same side as the barricades. Go figure. So a lot of problems in our politics, but politicking extends beyond that, and here you have Pemuda UMNO addressing a criticism to the Attorney General's chambers, saying that they are actually selective in their prosecution of sedition cases involving religious sensitivities. So this is where the paper doesn't make a distinction between themselves and Pemuda UMNO, and it kind of gives a visual representation of Muslims disproportionately penalized in this case against non-Muslims who seem to have, you have tiada tindakan, which means no action was taken. Bit of a problem there, but anyway, that's Sinar Harian today. News Straits Times and The Sun both have the story on MH17. Here, the head of the forensics team, who actually knew somebody on board who's talking about his personal issues regarding dealing with the remains of his friend. General story on the question of remains. Some, I think only 62 out of the 226 bodies recovered would be in reasonably good and complete state. Utusan Malaysia, Metro and Berita Harian all give prominence to the ongoing conflict in Gaza, including the recent bombing of a UN shelter. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, says the act was not just a moral outrage, but possibly a crime. So there you have it, Utusan Malaysia with that headline, saying that Hamas is not likely to be beaten. And here, a talk of a consumer boycott. The question really is a consumer boycott really going to do the job? And Sinar Harian, interestingly enough, if you go back to Sinar Harian, has a story about trade ties between Malaysia and Israel. According to Israeli statistics, Malaysia is like the 15th largest trading partner for them. They exported some 1.5 billion USD worth of goods to Malaysia in 2013. Quite considerable. What's going on there? Sinar Harian has that story. Berita Harian also has a story there. That's the Gaza story, but here is a story about municipal council and drains that stink. Talking about stink and disease and stuff, the Star and really ends our round out with its focus on Ebola. Ebola is a complex issue, and I think best not to kind of cite movies and such in our analysis. Better keep it as scientific as we can, and the Star is working on that. One thing I do want to point out before I go is this little story on page 3 of the Star. 15-year-old boy, he's looking at the death penalty. Now the question is, can minors actually be sentenced to death? I don't think so. They in fact are held at the pleasure of His Majesty under something called the Tahanan Limpas Sultan system that we have here, that he's held at the pleasure of His Majesty. But that itself has been a bit of a scandal over the years, because minors on capital charges have often spent more time than adults who are involved in the same case. And so that's huge violation of their human rights and violation of natural justice. So that's something I think for all journalists to look at. That story over there, 15-year-old on a death penalty charge. And the phrase of the day is tak peduli. Tak peduli, loosely translated as neglect or not given a damn. I think the question is, there are lots of populations, people, individuals, issues that don't get much concern, or even if there is concern, nothing's very much is done to redress that situation. That's all we have for you this morning. It is the 4th of August. I'm Sharaad Kuttan. You've been watching BFM's Morning Headlines, BFM 89.9.